to get into. What in the world got you into this in the first place?
Well, Renee, interesting. My father, Gary Trego, actually started the company, Trego-Dugan Aviation. He was a rancher. We are cattle ranchers in Nebraska by trade, initially years and years ago. And he always had a love for aviation when he was a young man and he was managing our ranch. He told my grandfather he wanted to be in aviation. And my grandfather said, he wasn't very enthusiastic about it, but he said, all right, I understand. Because my grandfather flew Super Cubs and all that kind of things on the ranch. And he said, that's fine. You can do that as long as you maintain the ranch as well. So my father started what was Trego Aviation in 1970 in North Platte, Nebraska. He had one FBO and he did flight training. He actually did flight training on our ranch in Sutherland, Nebraska, which is 15 miles.
Wow.
On a grass strip.
So is that where you learned, or am I getting ahead of myself?
Well, I learned from him. He taught me how to fly, and he was an FAA examiner for 30 years. Very, very particular. He was very difficult, I wouldn't say difficult, but a particular and difficult instructor to take instruction from, because you had to do it the right way. And I think me being his daughter, he didn't want me to be unsafe also. So there was an extra layer of safety on his lesson giving. But yeah, when I was a young girl, I got my private pilot's license at his company, Trego Aviation, and I got my commercial rating and I got my multi-engine rating. I did it for fun. I didn't know I was going to be a professional pilot. I just flew for fun because I like to fly, and he taught me how to fly. Then I went to the University of Nebraska and I got an engineering degree, and I moved to Houston, Texas, and I sold mainframe computers for NCR Corporation. And NCR allowed me to fly a Cherokee 235, base it at Houston Hobby, and fly to all my sales territory to sell mainframes like Midland, Texas, Louisiana, somewhere in Kansas, those kind of places. So I just built my time doing that. I'd be Southwest Airlines, me in the 235, and then another American. But it worked great. I got a lot of time. I liked it. They reimbursed me for all my flying because I was on the job. And then long story short, I met my husband in Houston, who is an aviation attorney, ironically. So he and I would fly together. He didn't have his license initially. Then he got his license in Houston, and we flew the 235 together places. Then we got married, and we moved to Nebraska, purchased the FBO from my father, and have grown it into other areas. Now we have a charter operation out of Chicago, and we have a large part of our company is in airline ground handling for airlines. We maintain jets, we fly them, we operate a charter certificate. So it's grown from there. We started when we first purchased the company from my father, who still is the chairman of the board in the company. We had, I think, 11 employees. Now there's, I think, 1,200 employees in the company.
Yeah, Vince called me at one point, and I was listening to the message, and I was looking out the window of the airplane that I was on, and it was a Trego-Dugan fuel truck. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's following me.
Yeah, so I know.
You've really made a big name and a big footprint in the organization, that it all came out of your dad's love for aviation. That's amazing.
Yeah, my dad is the proof is in the pudding, in that my father, who's kind of like John Wayne, he's not one to be real emotional, and he is so proud of our company and what we have been able to accomplish, that's what makes it really neat, because he's just busting with pride. So, and I highly encourage women and girls and females to say to themselves, hey, I can do it. Flying is for females as well as males. There's no, you get to go great places. In the corporate aviation world, we're flying people in private jets. People that go on vacation in private jets usually go to good spots. So you're not going to bad spots. And it's really a fun profession. The airlines is just snatching people up, pilots up right now. So it's really hard to keep pilots. And so what that means for pilots is you can make really good money.
Yeah, you're in demand and you can make great money. I think it's fascinating. I was speaking to this guy at a conference, and he looked at me and he's like, "Hey, how do we get more women in aviation?" And for those of you who don't know, it's about 6% pilots that are female worldwide. It's probably even a little bit smaller than that in the general aviation or corporate aviation world, even though I think women hold roughly 10 or 15% of private pilots' licenses. Those who make a career out of it is a much smaller number. But I looked at him and I'm like, "Have you ever invited a girl to go flying with you?" And he said, "No." And I said, "If you look around this room that's 90% men, and each one of these men invited 2 young women to go flying, we would have a lot more female aviators."
Absolutely. And we've had female jet pilots in my division, in the charter division. Most of them, though, ironically, started because their fathers. They started, one of them, 2 of them that worked and flew the jets with me. Now they both work for an airline. Both of them work for airlines that their fathers worked in. So one of them, Sunny Rifle, she went to Alaska Airlines from Seattle, and she posted a picture of her dad's last flight, and she and her dad were in the cockpit together.
Oh, what a sweet story.
Yeah. So I totally think you're right. It would be nice if the men, not just daughters, but they would invite 2 females to go flying and encourage them to fly.
Absolutely.
We would be able to use that number. So it'd be great.
So let's get back to the exciting stuff. What is the craziest thing that's ever happened to you flying?
Oh boy. I hate hangar stories, Renee, but let's see.
Like, did Vince propose to you on an airplane? That would be an exciting story.
He did not.
He should have.
I know. I gotta think. I'm sorry. I don't know. You're catching me on let's see. Exciting. One time.
What's your favorite runway to land into? What's the best place you've ever gone?
Well, flying into the mountains is it's the coolest from, that was amazing type of a feeling. But it also requires that you be on your game. You know your airplane, the performance. Telluride, when you land at Telluride, Colorado, it's one runway, east-west runway, 927.
On the side of a mountain, I've seen it.
Yep. And the peaks around Telluride are 14,000 feet. So they like you to come, and it's a horseshoe around the airport. And at the end of the runway is a cliff that drops off. So you can't misjudge your approach. And it's not a terrifically long runway. And then the runway in the center dips down. So just as you're flaring, you have to let it sink a little bit more, because where you would normally touch on a completely level runway is not where you touch in Telluride. You have to let it sink a little bit longer. But, you land one direction and then you take off the other. So if you're coming in and you're landing and somebody's taking off the Telluride, they need to stay to the right and leave the airspace. It can be interesting.
Yeah, communication is key there for sure. So
now,
tell me about training. Like, how is that for you? Do you enjoy going back into the sim and training? How do you feel about that?
From a 135 perspective, as a captain, you have to be trained. You have to do your 293, 297 check every 6 months to maintain the PIC status for 135. So every 6 months you're current, and I alternate the airplanes. On one interval will be the Lear 45 series, then at the 6th month will be the CJ, then the Lear 45, the CJ, the Lear 45. Typically in our company, we don't have, pilots are trained on one aircraft, and we don't overlap for safety reasons and Argus Platinum and all those kind of things. As the director of ops, I can maintain a 2 aircraft platform status because I have to be the person that backs up everything and make sure that the pilots are trained and safe. Training, we use CAE, Simuflight, for all of our training. I like them. I got type ratings at Flight Safety and also CAE. I like CAE because Flight Safety was a lot of military, ex-military instructors, and they weren't as customer service oriented as CAE. That's not to say that they're easier at CAE. That just means they view you as a client and a customer. Now that was years ago. Now Flight Safety, I think, has made a lot of strides, and they're very similar to CAE Simuflight. But CAE is global. You have a lot of international clients that come in to get recurrent training on these airplanes. So you do meet a lot of different people from other countries, especially a lot of other countries. And the simulators are phenomenal. When you get in a simulator, like on the Lear 45, it was purchased from Bombardier. So you think you're in the actual airplane. You go up on these big hydraulic arms. I know you're familiar, but for those watching that aren't familiar, you literally walk across this bridge, get into a huge, it's like a huge conference room, essentially, and the instructor sits behind you. You get in your seats, and you would swear you're in the actual aircraft. They can give you, of course, all the simulator flying is all the emergencies. So it's always night. You have compound emergencies. If you can get through the training and fly the simulator, the airplane is a piece of cake to fly. And it's much more reliable. I mean, everything happens in the simulator. I remember when I got my type rating in the Lear 45, the examiner let me land, and they never do this, but it was the last landing of the type, and he put smoke into the cockpit of the simulator. Actual smoke. He pumped it in. And I thought, what? So he was wanting to see, our egress, the emergency evacuation procedures, which are a memory item. So, you do all the emergency evacuation procedures and you get out. And he was like, good job, Trace. You just got your type rating. And awesome. I'm like, it never happens. Usually they don't go to that extreme. But, they can even pump smoke in there. And you have to put your smoke goggles on. And, if you're flying the aircraft, of course, you lose both engines. They give you when you train at a company like that, and we do train, and the way we fly, it is rigorous, but it makes you a better pilot. And it's nerve-wracking every 6 months, though, because in no other profession do you have to prove you can do something every 6 months. So if I go to the 135 check ride and I don't pass, I get an unsatisfactory. Now I have to get remedial training, and I have to go with the FAA, and I have to do all these things, and potentially you lose your job. You have to make corrections when people aren't competent in flying aircraft. So it isn't just automatic. You don't just say, oh, I'm going to recurrent training and it's going to be fun. No, it's not really fun. It's not fun. It takes work, but it is a feeling of accomplishment. Every time you land an airplane and you're flying a corporate jet and you land and you taxi in and the customer walks away, you have a feeling of exhilaration. It's really a cool profession. It makes you charged and ready to go. It's a feeling of accomplishment, because every is a different landing. It's not the same. It's not tried and it's never boring, is what I'd say. It's
right. There are always variables that you have to account for, and
yes.
In flying, there's no control over the weather, certainly.
No.
there's not often control over runways or passengers or anything else. So it is
you meet some great people along the way. You make great relationships. You have customers that are actually a pleasure to fly, you know, who appreciate you and appreciate what you can do and you do. And I think as a female in aviation, particularly as a pilot, I think you really are, once you can prove you can do it, you really are appreciated. And people are a little more enamored, I think, than they are with your male cohorts.
Yeah, you've had to climb harder to get there, guaranteed.
Yeah, and that's not to say, I mean, the gentlemen in our industry are great to fly with. I've flown with some amazing pilots. I've learned a lot. They're fun to go on a trip with. You know, when you have to sit with somebody for hours on end flying somewhere, it's an enjoyable thing to do. And I've met some great people. So it's been a
fantastic. Well, Traci, thank you so much for joining me for this Pilot Talk podcast. I love your story. I love that your dad inspired you. And I love that he still has a passion for aviation after all these years. Mm-hmm. I love that you fly, that you're the pilot, and that your husband is the stay-at-home, even though he doesn't always stay at home, aviation attorney. I think that's a sweet role reversal in some ways, and I think that it's fantastic. So for those of you who are not already subscribers, I hope that you subscribe either on YouTube or on iTunes to this podcast, whether you're watching it in video or just listening to the audio form of this. If you want to follow me, you can find me at René Banglesdorf on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And Traci, tell us how we can find Trego-Dugan.
Yeah, I'm Traci, Traci at Trego. It's Trego, and then a hyphen or a dash, Dugan.com. You can go to our website, Trego-Dugan.com, and you'll see all of us on there. And I'm on there as well, but anybody can email me if they want. I love to just talk the talk. So I really appreciate you having me on the show, René. You know, you're a joy.
Thanks, Traci.